I would like to introduce at this point the president of Mariposa County Resource Conservation District and a private contractor himself, and that's David Mecchi, who is going to be talking about tree removal and private structures. Did I get that about right?
Close enough.
Close enough, okay. Do you want this mic or that one?
Good morning, everyone. I see we had a pretty good turnout this time. It's really good to see everybody come. I know everybody's got a lot of questions. We're going to try to do the best we can to answer all the questions you have. We are kind of limited to what we can do, so please be patient. If I start spasming and acting kind of weird, I hurt my back yesterday, so I might go into a spasm. So just, it's probably a good excuse, I guess, for me to act weird. We're going to go into residential, and most people here probably are going to be involved in this because everybody owns a house. Everybody has trees around their house. If they don't, they probably planted trees, which are usually not going to be affected by this pine beetle. We basically are talking more like on 1 to 20 trees, like you're talking about earlier. They threaten your structure, your infrastructure, your roads, your garages, your houses. And we don't want that call that they were talking about with CAL FIRE to come out and rescue you because guess what? In the middle of the night, the wind blew down a big pine and it smashed you and your wife, and now we have funerals because we didn't take the trees out. It's usually a small area. I mean, most people in this county, and I average, they have 5 to 10 acres. Some people have less, like Ponderosa Basin. So we're not really working on large plots of land on this particular part of it. We'll get into a different presentation later about full-scale logging on what they do on the largest parcels. Usually your access is close to where your hazard trees are. It's going to be your driveway. It's going to be the closest road. Might be a county road, might be your driveway, might be a back road. Everything is going to be close to where you're at. So you're going to be working in kind of a confined space. So you have restricted operating areas because of terrain, boundaries, and you're worried more about your defensible space. CAL FIRE wants their 100 feet. Well, most trees that you're going to deal with are going to be within your 100 feet. So you're going to have to do something to address the dead trees and what becomes of the slash and the logs that are left behind. So we're going to give a warning from the very beginning. Stay within your ability. Do not go beyond your ability. If you do not feel comfortable falling trees, you do not feel comfortable climbing trees, please stay within your comfort zone. Because we don't need CAL FIRE to be called because you fell a tree on top of yourself. So we want to make sure you stay within your training. There's a lot of resources out there, LTOs, and private contractors that can help you. So please engage in the professionals if you do not have that ability and that skill. Okay, these are some definitions we're going to go through just so everybody's kind of on the same page. There are some people here in this room that this is kind of like second nature to them. If they're in the logging industry or anything to do with the tree, arborists, they know these terms, but this is all for the general public. So felling, or falling as I call it, is getting the tree on the ground. That's just however you get it there. Whether it be with a chainsaw, a handsaw, an axe, a beaver, whatever. It's getting the tree on the ground. That's what you need to get it. Whatever technique it takes to get it there, that's what you're going to use. And we're going to cover several techniques on how to do that. Limbing, obviously, is cutting the limbs off. It's not pruning. Pruning is a standing tree. Limbing is once you get it on the ground, you want to get the limbs off, and you want to get it down to just the bole, which is the main trunk of the tree. And then you're going to deal with those. Slash is what's left over. That's the limbs you just cut off. And you're going to have all these limbs, and then you're going to have the top. And we always figure that the top is going to be 6 inches or smaller. So anything 6 inches smaller plus the limbs becomes the slash. And a tree will produce, a large ponderosa will produce a lot of slash. And it looks like when you're standing there, oh, that's not many limbs. If you get it on the ground, it looks like it multiplies by 10 because there's a lot more limbs than you realize. Bucking is cutting the logs into a desired length, such as firewood. That's a bucking technique. cutting them into merchantable logs. That's to send them to a mill. Or just cutting them into manageable lengths to be able to get them to a place where you can put them so they're right in the middle of your yard. There are several techniques of falling a tree. Falling in place in one piece, in sections, or sections with a crane. So there's various ways. We're going to go through each one of these. Falling in place without a line, a LTO, if he doesn't have the skill, he will have a professional faller that knows how to put an undercut in a tree and a back cut and get it to the desired place. There's a technique and a science to it. It's not something you just go and hack it this way, and it falls over. 99% of the time people do that. They're lucky. They usually don't get killed, but most of the time the tree does not go exactly where they want it to go. Or they get the saw stuck in there and now they're stuck. Now they don't know how to go farther. So you're doing it without a line, so there's nothing there to help you except to just use the saw and the technique and wedges to get it where you want. Most of the time the tree leans that way. Most people think if the tree's leaning that way, it'll go that way. I've seen a tree that was leaning one direction and it went just the opposite direction. It all depends on the skill of the person and the overall scenario. It says, with wind absent or blowing in the desired direction, believe me, I don't want to fall trees where the wind's blowing. A slight wind, yes. I fell a lot of trees. I come from a logging family. Mark Scott was talking earlier about loggers in the area. My family started the logging business back in 1948. My uncle and my cousins still log. They work out of Awani. Logging has been an industry in this county for a long, long time. And believe me, I fell a lot of trees, and I do not want to be falling trees in the wind. Because just about the time you think the wind's going your direction, the wind will change, and that tree will go the opposite direction. Putting a line on the tree to pull it into a desired direction. This is something that people think that, well, if I get a kind of a cut in there and I pull on it, it's going to go that way. I guarantee you about 75% of the time it's going to go the other way. Because you think it's going one way, and there's a lot of weight there. Most people put a small little rope on there and pull on it, and the rope breaks. And what happens is it goes this way and then bounces back and comes back at them. So we don't really want to put a line on things unless you're professional. Putting a line on something, unless you know what you're doing, it'd be best if you didn't do it. But what it is you just go up to a certain level, you put a line on, and you want to use a piece of equipment that's heavy enough that's going to be able to, if the tree goes the other direction, it's not going to pull the tractor back to you. Please do not put a lawn garden tractor on a line and try to pull a tree over. Obviously, that's the weight difference is going to make a difference. So if you're putting a line on a tree, you want to make sure that we always use a 15-degree angle, and that's what should be left to the professionals if you're going to put a line on something, because it really is not really appropriate for the common person. Leave it up to the LTOs and the professionals to do that. Okay, here's the picture of them sectioning on a free fall. This guy up there is this climber. He's gone to the top of the tree. He's limbed the tree. He's taken out all the limbs all the way as close to the top as he safely feels he can go. And he's come down that tree. He's taken the top out. He's coming down and doing it in sections. He's doing it in sections that are comfortable for where he's at in the ground. If he's going to be close to a house, if he's going to be close to a driveway, that just happens to be that it's a really dry, so he fell that particular section that length. Sometimes it'll be longer, sometimes it'll be shorter. It all depends on the comfort of the climber, the wind, and the weight. This is bringing down a section with a pulling a line. This is all should be done with a professional. This is just ways that professionals do these things. Most of the time they do that because they don't want that free fall. They don't want to just land close to the tree, but they want to have some control over it. So if you'll notice, whoops, I think I did something, Frank. Oh, here it is.
It's the center button.
This right here.
The big one.
Whoops, what do I do now?
Hold, please.
I'm technically, that one right there, okay. Oh. All right, if you'll see, there's the one line here. It's attached to the end of the piece, goes up to a pulley, comes back down. They're controlling it on the bottom. There's another line here. They're bringing it down equally. They're coming down the ground equally. So it takes a crew of people to do this. He's bringing this particular tree down. Obviously, he will bring this one down also, but they might be able to fall that one. They're just using that as a pole to use their pulley at the top. Okay, that's felling sections with a crane. Sometimes it's necessary to use a crane. The crane is used because if you're around houses, a lot of times you can have a tree on the back side of your house that you can't get to any other way. They'll use the crane to reach across and they'll take it out in sections. Usually they'll do exactly what they were doing there, except they'll attach, there's a picture coming up, she'll attach to that section and he'll pick it up and he'll bring it around and set it to the other side so it's in a place that's more easily to handle and it's a little safer. Obviously he goes up the top of the tree just like I showed you, and he attaches to it and obviously moves it to where it needs to go. It is expensive. That's one of the things that's expensive. The last time I hired a crane, he was about $100 an hour. That's just the work. That's not him driving there. So it can get very expensive very quickly. One tree is one thing, but if you do 8 or 10 around your house, it's gonna be really cost prohibitive. This is the falling of the section with the crane. Obviously the crane is working to take out a tree in the middle here. He's just getting set up. Here's the climber's up there. He's putting a slight undercut in it so he can get it off the top and get it out of there. They lifted this one straight up and over. And this right here is a deck. You see there's a deck right there. This is a pretty good size, I think it's a sugar pine, John. Is that what a sugar pine? How big was it?
About 36.
About 3 foot in diameter, right next to his deck. So they're taking it out of the section. Because obviously there's no place to put that tree except to take it out with a crane. Okay, dealing with the slash. That is the big mess that's left over. There's a lot of ways to do it. You can make it to where it's makes it look pretty if you do a lot of work, or you can just kind of lump and scatter. Those are the 4 ways that we deal with it. Lump and scatter is you take everything that's on the ground and you get it down to 30 inches or below. That is the standard. That's what the loggers do, is they get it to 30 inches below. Personally, if I'm going to lump and scatter something, I'm going to get it below 30 inches. I prefer it about 12 inches or less because it gets to the ground quicker. You just scatter it so you create a lower intensity fire if you do get a fire come through. You cannot do this around defensible space, obviously, because it's nothing but fuel. It can be ugly in some people's eyes. Personally, out in my fields, I don't care if it's lump and scattered because it doesn't bother me. It's not in front of my house. One thing about it is it does 2 things. It also gets it puts the minerals and puts all the good things back into the soil because it gets it into the ground sooner. You're not removing the material and eventually it'll rot, and it'll make better topsoil and it creates better soils. And it is actually it's the easiest way to do it. I tend to do it that way because it just seems to be a lot easier. Unless I've got a mess or I'm trying to protect my cow pasture. Pile and burn. Cow fire requires 4-foot piles. 4-foot piles, 4 by 4 by 4, preferably. There's a reason for that. Most people do not have a fire truck sitting next to them. Most people burn, somebody will burn around their house, some people burn away from their house. So they want you to be controllable. In other words, if it gets kind of out of hand, you don't get anything that's too big. You want to get down to it, you want a 10-foot clearance with mineral soil. How do you know where mineral soil is? Mineral soil is where you get down to where there's no more vegetative matter. Anything that will burn is not to be left in any kind of clearance. So if you put a line around it to burn it, You want to make sure there's nothing inside of that that will actually catch fire and then move into the outside of that line and start your whole property on fire. You got to do it when it's not under trees. You can't put a pile right underneath the tree and expect to burn it, because two things: you can catch that tree on fire, you can burn it, and it just is not a good idea to have a hot fire in the tree. You need waterproof covering if you're going to burn it in the wintertime. So in other words, if you pile it in the middle of August when it's 110 degrees outside, obviously you can't burn it. Burn restrictions will allow you to. So you want to put, I usually just take an old garbage bag, throw it across a piece there, and throw a piece of wood on it, and that gives me a dry spot to start my fires. That's just, it makes it a lot easier in the wintertime. You don't have to use fuels, which are actually illegal to start a fire with. You can actually start it with newspaper, and it starts very easily. Especially in a 4-foot pile, you'll take up probably half that pile with a coverage. So you can keep it from getting wet. It looks clean when the burning is finished. It does look a lot cleaner. The only disadvantage is it does leave a spot of burn where all those piles are. So it'll take about a year for that to come back. So if you don't mind a few little spots out there, that's a good way to do it. It doesn't bother me, but some people don't like that burn spot. So they'd rather remove the material than to burn it. Chipping, a lot more expensive than burning. We want to chip it, fine, chip it. It's expensive. It's labor intensive, because if you take 10 trees around your house, it's going to take a long time to chip those. And you can only chip 6 to 8 inches. So you can't, it depends on the chipper, obviously. But it can be scattered on the ground. Some people like their chips. They like to have chips so they can put on the ground, use it for landscaping. The chips, if you really chip all your trees, and then you have 6 or 8 trees around your house, I think you're going to have more chips than you're going to be able to deal with. So you got to watch how much you chip, because you might end up with a pile of chips that you have no use for. You do not have to worry about burning underneath the tree, so you can do this anywhere you can access it. A lot of times you can't get into there to chip. You have to drag it to the chipper, because you can't get the chipper to where you're at. It might be because of a road, because of building, terrain, but it does leave it looking really clean. You actually have a really clean surface on your yard, so you don't really, you're chipping and removing it or scattering it. So it makes it look a lot cleaner. Loading and hauling, you don't have to have this fancy machine to do it. It sure be nice though sometimes to have that. But you can either do that or do it by hand. That's labor intensive. Slash, I don't know how many people pile brush, but it's a booger to actually get into a truck like that by hand. You'd have to have a smaller truck. You'd have to have a crew. It's labor intensive, I said. There are other alternatives, but you got to have a place to put this when you take it away. You have to put it somewhere on your property, or you have to have it somewhere off-site to be able to take it. The dump will take a certain amount of it, but I don't know how much they're actually going to take. If people keep taking stuff to the dump, they may refuse some of it if they don't have the room for it. It is accessibility sometimes to be a problem, because you have to be able to get this truck to where you're at, or drag it, get it to the truck and get it loaded. So sometimes you can't just get this truck and pull it right to the tree. You have to get that slash to the truck. Okay, dealing with logs. There are 5 different ways we can do logs. We can do them in various sizes. Okay, leave them in place. Okay, cut the tree down, you fall, take all the limbs off, take the top out, you've got this bowl laying there. Leave it there. Doesn't matter. As long as it's not in your way. If that's your driveway right there, I don't think you want to leave it there. But if it's in a place where it's alongside your driveway, or maybe it's down the road, or you can just leave it there. It doesn't have to be moved. Cal Fire doesn't have a problem with them leaving it there, because if you take away all the small material, the fire hazard's a lot less. So they don't mind you leaving it there. That's fine. They don't. Some people like those logs laying out there. It kind of looks neat. Some people are going to replant, you want those logs laid at kind of certain angles so you have a shade place to put your small seedlings. It's not too bad. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's unattractive, but I wouldn't mind having logs in my yard. It doesn't bother me. Some people would because they don't really have the room for it. But you can also buck those into a smaller length and remove them, or move them over from where they are. You move them somewhere else. This is not really particularly labor intensive, but you have to pay for this little guy right here. Him coming out to move those logs for you is going to cost a little bit. I don't have prices on that, but obviously if you're going to cut it into chunks and move it to another place, it's going to require equipment, which is money. One thing about it is, if you move it off some of your property, it gets it away from your viewscape, and it does make your property look better, but you have to have a place to put this. It's either going to have to be put on somewhere on site, or deal with a neighbor or something. Okay. Loading and transporting. Obviously, this is going to be very expensive. Right here, you can see this thing sticking out here. That's probably a heel boom. That heel boom is probably going to load that trailer, and that's going to cost a lot of money. One of those is about $175 an hour. You can load a lot of logs in an hour, but he's going to cost a lot to get there. So that's very, very expensive. Usually this will go into the next segment, which is the full-scale logging operation, which basically is this. I understand this is the contractor that did this. He took up these logs away and took care of them himself off of the private landowner. That is expensive because if he's going to take them, he can maybe do something with them. But if you're paying this loader here to load those trucks, it's going to cost you a lot of money. And then you have to get those logs to that loader. That loader is going to go running out there in the field and pick them up for you. You've got to have a skidder or something to skid those logs to that loader. And right now, there's no place to take these logs. I hate to tell you, there's just no place. We have not found a place yet. I'm on the tree mortality committee for the county, and we have just not been able to find any place in this county right now, at this moment, to take these logs when we get them on the ground. That's why on site right now is looks like to be the best. So we're just going to have to just deal with what we got, or we can mill them in place. You'll have to have a contractor come in. You'll have to set up his mill. He will have to have equipment to move those logs to that mill. That mill does not go to each log, so you will have a skidder of some sort bring them to him, and then he's going to have some piece of equipment, a skidder or something, to get them to his mill, move them onto his mill. Landowner usually pays for the milling cost. Sometimes you cannot, if you are doing anything that is for sale, selling, bartering, you cannot do that without the proper paperwork. So if you are, like it says at the bottom, maybe retained by the landowner or donated to the community, only the landowner can keep it, or he can donate it off, but you cannot sell it or trade it. So you can't have this guy come in and trade off. Well, I'm gonna mill that for half. That's a barter. You can't do that without an exemption. And the thing is this is expensive for this guy to come in and do this, because he's not going to get anything out of it unless you pay him. Most guys will not just take the lumber. And if you use the lumber, you cannot use it for habitable structures. It's not an inspected lumber. So you can only use it for sheds, porches, barns, such like that. Something that does not have electricity in it. Okay, PG&E's responsibility. We kind of already went through PG&E. I have to hand it to PG&E. They are really doing a great job. And some people might have complaints. Yeah, I've had some problems myself. But it's not really PG themselves, it's their contractors that seem to be having the problem. This says they'll take down half or dead as, usually they go by quarter. Half, they might if they feel it's going to be completely dead in the next month. But they have so many trees right now, they're just trying to get caught up. So a lot of it, they're holding a lot of trees. So sometimes you'll see them come through. They'll take trees and they'll leave others that look like they're half dead. They will probably be back again to re-inspect, and they'll take that tree out at that time. They will, most of the time, in most cases, they will lop and scatter your slash for you. It's there. They will handle it. They'll get it on the ground. Not that they're really going to take it 100 feet that way and scatter it for you, but they will get it on the ground and get it to about the 30-inch height. Chipping material, they might chip it if it's around your house and you ask them to. If you work, one thing about it is PG&E will work with the landowner. I found that out myself. Is if you have a tree that's next to your house and it's in the power lines, they want to clean it up and make it look good too. So they will come and chip it. I've had them chip material around my house. They do pull it from the back of the house. They can't get a chipper back there. They pull it to the front of the house and they chip the stuff. But they won't always do that. Don't expect them to do that, especially if it's something that's kind of away from your house. They will expect you to do a certain amount, and they are so overloaded with all the things they've done, like in Bass Lake. That is actually phenomenal what they've done over there, the time they've had. But they are not required to bucket, but they will most of the time. So you can, if you ask them, can you cut those into smaller lengths so I can handle it? They probably would do that. But if they did that for everybody, they would not get the work done that they need to get done. Okay, number one, formulate a plan. Make sure when you start this project you have some type of plan. Don't just go out there thinking it's going to happen. So the first thing you want to do is you want to find the trees that you have. You want to mark them in some way. It says flag here. I tend to use paint. That way it's a little more permanent. It doesn't get ripped down. So you want to find the trees you think are a candidate to be removed. So then you make a list of what you need to do with that tree, what you've made that decision and what tree it's going to be. So, slash disposal. How will I dispose of my slash? Gave you some options here. You can chip it, you can, lop and scatter, you can haul it off site. It all depends on your certain circumstance. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this. Log treatment. Am I going to leave it in place? Am I going to remove it? Am I going to just put it in a pile and burn it eventually? Let it dry a little bit more and burn it. It'd be an intense fire, but you could do that. And then the restoration of ground conditions. Is there going to be ground disturbance? There's rules and regulations for ground disturbance. So we also need to make sure that we are contacting people that know when and where we need to get the right paperwork, permits. So, are you going to restore your ground by lopping and scattering and leaving it? Are you going to reseed your ground that maybe has been disturbed a little bit? You're allowed to do up to an acre worth of ground without any kind of permit by the state laws. But if you have any questions, you need to get a hold of an LTO, licensed timber operator, or a professional that you find in your phone book. And get on this website. If you get a hold of an LTO, we have the list back there. You can get a hold of somebody and you can get the actual facts on what you can do and what you cannot do. These guys have been trained. They know what to do and when to do it, because they have to answer to CAL FIRE also. Then interview a couple of the contractors, LTOs or whoever you contact. Maybe the first guy comes along, you don't care for him. Call the next guy. Maybe you can work out a plan between the two of them. And try to find either get a bid or an agreement for times and materials. Get an estimate. Find out how much it's going to cost you. 99% of these guys will come out and give you an estimate. They'll say, okay, yeah, it's going to cost you $1,500 to remove that tree. $2,500 to remove that tree. They'll give you an idea how much it's going to cost you. You can kind of plan for it. And maybe it'll be cost prohibitive. You won't be able to do it. So once you come in agreement with you guys, then you can sign your MOU, and then make sure that you have secured, and it's up to the LTO to secure the exemptions. So make sure that the exemption is applied for, and you get it before he starts work. You want to see that. If it's required, you need to see that piece of paper that is issued from the state of California. What is an LTO? And when is it necessary? Okay. Obviously, we've been talking about LTOs, or licensed timber operators. They're instructed and tested by the state of California by laws by timber harvesting. They must be hired by the resident if the hired material is sold or bartered and must secure an exemption. So, if you're selling and bartering, it's got to go through an LTO. If you're doing the work yourself, you can do it yourself. And these are the two exemptions. 1038C, which means you can remove it within 150 feet of a structure, and it is submitted by the LTO. He will submit that exemption to CAL FIRE. And the 1038K, which is the drought mortality, that's what we're in right now. This is a new exemption that they've come up with to help you guys. Can cover an entire parcel and submitted by the LTO as long as the area of harvest is less than 20 acres. Now I know there's people in here that have more than 20 acres. But if you're harvesting only 5 of it, you fall under the 20 acres. If you go to 21 acres of harvest, then you must go to the next exemption. And you also need to have an RPF to do the exemption. Registered Professional Forester has to come out on anything that's over 20 acres. So the LTO will tell you, hey, you know, I can't do this exemption because it is 21 acres. You'll have to have an RPF. Then you'll have to go to the RPF list, and maybe they'll suggest one. There are some really good ones around the area. Whoops. Okay. Project costs will vary depending on the variables. Obviously, how many trees you got to remove. If you got only one, it's not a big deal. It's not going to cost as much as if you're going to remove 15. Size and condition. Well, if you got 20, all of them under a foot, versus 20 over 3 feet, it's going to cost a lot of difference in the condition. And if the condition is that they're really dead, that means you're going to cost a little bit more because guys will not climb dead trees. I guarantee you right now. If they feel it's unsafe, they will not climb them. They'll figure a way to get them out of there. Topography and obstacles. You need to be able to get to them. Well, is there a tree? Is there a road that you can get to them? Is there a creek there? You can't go across the creeks. Is there a structure there? So it's going to cost a little bit more if you have to go around obstacles. Your landscaping and all that, location of all that stuff needs to be taken into consideration because sometimes people have prized roses they don't want to get smashed. So you got to make sure you work around those. How close are they to structures? Are these trees, are they right up next to like the one we showed? Is it right up next to the building, or are they far enough out that the LTO can follow that tree away from the structure? And what type of method are you going to use to get them out of there and get them on the ground? One piece or in sections? Cheapest, of course, and easiest is going to be one piece, but all these things are up next to houses. What are your equipment? The more equipment you have, the more expensive it's going to be, and the more it's going to take to get them there. 99% of the time, you're going to be paying for that transport to get that skidder, the heel boom, the whatever, to that site. That's the first cost. Then getting the trees in the ground and getting them moved is the second cost. So, what is your method of site disposal and your log treatments? What are the fee schedules for the contractor? How much is it going to cost you? And terms and conditions. Bid submission versus time and materials. Sometimes time and materials works better than any kind of a bid because a guy will probably jack the bid up a little bit more just to make sure he covers his cost. Time and materials is a little bit more, can be a little bit better in some circumstances. Okay, I'm done with my presentation, and is there any questions for what I just said?
Any questions for Dave?
Just a small property that's 14 acres, is 14 residents. The licensed timber, maybe 10 trees that need to come out. Licensed timber operator, we're not going to sell what we're felling. Do they still need to be licensed timber operators?
Yes. You have to have somebody that's either a licensed arborist or an LTO. If you're hiring somebody, I mean, I guess you could just go out and hire one. I wouldn't suggest it, but if you wanted to hire somebody that was a neighbor that didn't have fall trees, That's the liability you want to take on. The LTO is insured. The difference is the LTOs and the licensed guys, they're insured, they have to have insurance.
Okay,
So it'd be like, this is a licensed contractor.
good. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm out in Ponderosa Basin, and on my little quarter acre, I have 20 dead trees. They've all been marked and numbered and flagged in 2 different rounds by PG&E. They're all along power lines. And I know that a couple of them are quite large, 3 foot plus diameter. They're right in the V between 2 power lines and a transformer on a pole. But I know after a couple of years, they can't climb those guys. Is there any way we know when they're going to come out? Because like you said, we realize all the neighbors that just because they're coming out doesn't mean they're doing this street. They're kind of picking this tree and that tree. But I'd like to be able to be there, A, to just know what's going on, and B, to tell them some stuff about protecting the other trees that are not pines, which is the only trees I'm going to have left. Because every single pine on my property is now dead. So is there any way to know how to coordinate? And you say, well, you can ask them to do this and you can ask them to do that if they haven't been there while you're gone at work. So how do we know any scheduling?
Usually, when they send out their foresters, like ACRT, they usually will put a door hanger on your property.
Close to the gate.
Yeah, and they'll usually when they come to my place, because in their computer, I have dogs that bite, and I have a locked security gate. So they have to come talk to me because I have 3/4 of a mile runs through my place. So they actually have to, in the computer, it says they have to contact me before they come on my property. So I'm always there. So if they have a door hanger, because obviously, you're in the basin, so you don't have a lot of land, but you don't have fences that they have to cross and such. So they're in the area and they're going to take a tree out. They're supposed to give you a door hanger to say that they're going to be on your property, and they're going to give you notice. And the guys I deal with, they've always been really good about just calling. They've got my phone number, but they usually leave the door hanger either on my gate, or if they're walking through, they'll come and hang it on my door. So they'll notify you when they're coming. So they're not going to come and climb those trees without your permission, because they're in your property, even though it's on the PG&E right away.
Because I talked to one guy when it was marking, but that was 6 months ago. So they'll get another notice when they're really going to come home. The first tree they took, that didn't happen. I just was going to work and there they were climbing the tree. You're gonna have your call PG&E 5000.
Yes.
Yes. That was my next question.
Yes.
What's the number to call to get?
I was just actually when Ken said that, I was just going to say that. PG&E 5000, and that will get you connected, and it'll go through the phone tree, it'll get you where you need to go. And then you can ask those questions, and they'll send somebody out.
As long as I can let them know I want to know, I'm cool.
Yeah.
So, given the information we have here, are you of the belief that homeowners can go through their property and identify trees and then contact a licensed timber operator? Or should we contact Captain Bigelow and have one of his people come and identify trees for us?
That's your comfort zone. If you feel that you want to mark some trees that are unsafe or are not, maybe they're brown and you're not sure if you want to take them out or not, and you need professional consultation, then contact CAL FIRE, and Leonard, one of his compadres, will come out and check that for you.
You have your hand up for a question? Okay, just a second. Okay, David, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, guys.
You'll be here for the rest of the session and can talk with you individually.